It's an honor to welcome Ryan Beedie, the CEO of BD, a philanthropist, music enthusiast, proud husband and father. Born and raised in Burnaby, his father, Keith Beedie, founded their company in 1954. It is now the largest private real estate developer and property manager in British Columbia. Ryan has been instrumental in BD's expansion into Alberta and establishing BD Living. In 2020, Ryan received the Order of British Columbia, and just last week, he was named Canadian Business Leader of the Year by the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Congratulations, Ryan. As part of his philanthropy work, Ryan and BD have contributed over $100 million to the BC Children's Hospital, several other regional hospitals, and social houses across our province. In 2011, Ryan and his father donated $22 million to Simon Fraser University, the largest single contribution ever. And today, SFU BD boasts 30,000 alumni living in over 80 countries around the world. Ryan is also the founder of BD Luminaries, a social profit enterprise that removes barriers of entry for bright students to obtain a higher education. On today's show, we'll be discussing the importance of having a thriving industrial real estate sector in BC, why we still have a housing crisis, government policy, and Ryan's deep involvement in philanthropy. Ryan, thanks for taking the time to come on to Coastal Front today.
Thank you. It's great being here.
Now, Ryan, clearly your father was an incredibly successful man, but what's amazing is how you've been able to build BD well beyond your dad's achievements. And there's a lot of times family transitions going from one generation to the next, they don't have that kind of success. So maybe could you start by speaking to why you feel this has been such a successful transition from what your dad built to what you've been building today?
Yeah, so much credit goes to him. You know, he started from nothing, worked so hard. The year I was born, he was broke because his accountant had stolen from him for the second time. So he was going to go bankrupt. He flipped a coin, heads bankrupt, tails not. It was heads, but he still decided not to go bankrupt. He paid back all of his creditors and kept going. So imagine that. You've built up this business, and then boom, you get knocked down. He's got to start again. He was just a force to be reckoned with, tenacious. When he had his mind set on something, nothing was going to get in his way. He was a very intimidating figure. Growing up, he never had to spank me or just that look. I can see it right now, just that look, and I'm like, okay, whatever you say goes. So he was pretty amazing. But the business meant so much to him. Like in his life, and if he were here, he wouldn't object to this. Business was a priority. Then my mom, and then family. He was quite singularly focused on the company that mattered so much to him. So, he built it up through the 70s. In the 50s and 60s, he was involved with residential construction and general contracting, but he became a real industrial developer and contractor developer in the 70s, started retaining ownership of properties, and that's when the growth really started to happen. I joined in 1992, working alongside my brother from 92 to 99. And my dad was amazing, and I think other families could learn from this. He gave so much responsibility to me at a young age. I've seen other owners of businesses, keep control and not allow the next generation to, carry the reins and grow. He gave me, like in my mid-20s, authority to go out, buy land, do this, do that. Now, granted, I wasn't screwing up, so I think he had confidence in me, but the more confidence he showed in me, the more I would do, and then that energy just kept rolling. I equate it to the proverbial sort of baton passing. Like he's, mid-60s at this time. He's going around the track, but not that fast. I show up, I'm like, guns ablazing, let's go. He hands it off, and off I go. And I think, again, he would refer to it as the company, not my company, Keith Beedie, the company. He put it on a pedestal. He knew it wasn't just about him. It's his long-term employees. It's the tenants. It's the trades. And the fact that I cared as much or almost as much as he did about the business meant so much to him that I was so keen to drive it forward. So huge credit to him for creating the circumstances that allowed that progression to happen.
Well, that's a great overview in history. But look, let's give you some credit too, because you did take the baton, so to speak, and You've grown BD. It's beyond what your dad finished with, and you've got different segments that we're going to get into. What's your sort of philosophy, or what do you, when you reflect on your career up to this point, why do you think you've been able to, carry this on and make it even bigger? What's been the driver
it's a
behind
great question, and it's forums like this that actually allow you to think back and go, okay, what was really the driver? And I think there's a couple of things. There's this sort of first 15 years and maybe the last 15 years once I joined, because I've been there for 30 years now.
Mm-hmm.
At first, I think a real driver for me was to make him proud. I knew how much the company meant to him, and wanting to make your father proud of you was a real motivator. And I think that was a huge part of it. Maybe a little bit of insecurity because, okay, there's Keith Beedie, but I want to sort of chart my own course and sort of prove my own worth. And insecurity can be a really good motivator sometimes. So I think those two things took place. And as I got older, maybe in 2008, 9, 7 in there, it's like that those things didn't matter to me as much. I felt very confident in my own sort of established what I had done. And then we took it again to another level. And for me, I think a big part of that is just the importance that I've placed on relationships. I know it's something that people say all the time, but it's because it's true. I think I've been very good at, if I've been very good at anything, it's surrounding myself with some key people who I love and trust, and two of them happen to be my best friends, and giving them the latitude in many respects that my dad gave to me. These are talented people. Give them authority to grow in instilling, I instill these values and these principles into the company. I think relationships are so key to me, whether it's a subtrade or a tenant or a mayor of a certain place. We measure our relationships at our company in decades and not years. I look at everything that we do through the lens of reputation and long-term. We're going to do this. It's not about making a short-term buck. Mm-hmm. How is the company viewed by doing this deal or this transaction? Is this customer, are they going to be happy with us? What's most important to me is when people, employees or anyone looks at our name and they have a positive thing to say about it. Like, okay, I'm proud to work at that company, or they're a good company for the community, or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. So reputation has been a big driver for me. And again, having key people, Todd Ewan, who's president of our industrial division. Todd's my best friend. He's absolutely incredible at what he does. Rob Fiorvento on the BD Living side, also my best friend for 30 years. And they've done remarkable work. And people say, oh, you shouldn't work with your friends. And for me, it's been a wonderful experience. Yeah. And when you have total trust in the people around you, it's worked out really well for us.
Wow, good for you. That's nice and good story. You've talked about industrial real estate. That's really kind of what your brand is known for. I know you're branching out of these other areas like BD Living. We're talking about BD Luminaries, but let's start with the industrial real estate. Now, you run BC's largest industrial real estate company, and a lot of people don't really understand how important this industry is. I mean, we're all very familiar with residential real estate because we all live in a home, and we're all familiar with retail real estate because we go shopping and buy our groceries and whatnot, or commercial. Yeah. But it's that industrial piece that I think a lot of people are not so familiar with this. So can you maybe start by helping those of us who don't work and live in the world of industrial real estate understand why is it important and what does it do to the economy?
It's true. A lot of people overlook it. They just drive by and they see a warehouse. They don't think twice about it, right?
Yeah.
But the entire economy in the region needs industrial. It's the backbone of everything. Distribution space. When you go to the grocery store, where does that come from? It comes from a warehouse that's in Surrey or Langley or Richmond or Burnaby. Tons of jobs, tons of people are employed on the industrial side, whether it's manufacturing space, light manufacturing. We have a lot more manufacturing, I think, in BC than people realize. When I go through our tenant rosters, a lot of companies doing really cool things. Distribution space, warehousing. We're just finishing a massive project for Amazon, for instance. So the economic growth of the region is completely tied to industrial real estate. And as we run out of it, and we are running out of it, it will pose a challenge and potential limits on our economic growth, because companies that want to locate here need to have somewhere to be. So given, especially with the housing crisis and the other pressures on our lands, in many cases industrial gets sort of second fiddle. People don't think about it.
Yeah.
But from an employment standpoint, from a tax-based standpoint, the amount of property taxes generated from industrial in relation to residential is huge. Like, it's significant. Yeah. So it is so vital to the region. And I think in recent years there's been a bit more attention paid to that. I think the media started to cover it a little more than they did in the past, and that's a good thing because people, I think, should realize how important it is to a thriving economy.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's what I would describe as one of those industries that needs to exist.
Yes.
It might not be very sexy. I mean, probably for you it is. I think it's really interesting, but
I find it really sexy. I remember we were doing a project for Pattison Group, and Tom Monroe was a fellow that worked for Pattison. We're sketching out a site plan for a 400,000 square foot building. I'm getting all fired up. He said, Ryan, you're the only person I know who gets excited about industrial real estate, but it's when you grow up with it around the kitchen table, and it's what you do. And yes, we're involved in other areas, but admittedly, industrial's my main passion because I think I know it fairly well. So it's easy to get me excited.
You made reference to there's no new land being created. You made reference to sort of industrial real estate being pushed out. Now, if you take a look at Yaletown as an example, 100 years ago, I think you could find industrial real estate down there. There used to be horse stables 125 years ago down there. So how do you see this affecting the economy or society sort of in a more, this is a very philosophical question, but like as you start to see a lot of land being repurposed for living purposes and industrial being pushed out further and further, do you see any problems arising from this?
Yeah, I think there's a little less of that now. I think there's been a bit of that over the past maybe 20, 30 years in the city of Vancouver. I look at these issues more regionally than city. I think the media narrative cuts it up. Oh, here's City of Vancouver, but all these issues I think are regional. Mm-hmm. And the industrial market, for instance, in Richmond's pretty full right now. There's not much left in Richmond. The growth has been happening in Delta, Surrey, Langley. You're out to Mission and even Chilliwack now. So the repurposing of some lands that are industrial for residential purposes can make sense in certain cases. Other cases, maybe not. We've got to protect these job-generating lands, and I think there's been a shift, in that way in the past couple of years.
Because there's been a lot of effort in that sort of sense when it comes to ALR in agricultural land.
100%.
But it doesn't seem to basically be the case when it comes to things like industrial.
The Metro Vancouver has this regional growth strategy, and they've taken steps. They understand how we are running low on industrial land and how crucial it is. So there are cases where maybe there's you also can't have this one size fits all kind of blanket. You did that with the ALR. There's a lot of land in the ALR that belongs there. There's some that doesn't. And if you can't just blanket go, this is all industrial. Well, maybe that site is industrial, but it's right beside a rapid transit station. So perhaps we could maybe put that elsewhere. So these are competing interests for lands. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you mentioned the ALR because, it's been in place now since the 70s, and it's obviously a very important thing, but it does limit the amount of developable land there is for industrial and residential. And it's a big reason why I would argue that values for industrial in Metro Vancouver are much higher than, say, a Calgary, or rents are far higher, and land prices are far higher. So if a company's going to locate, they look, okay, I want to be in Vancouver, but it's really expensive. So this is a tax on everybody. It really is, but is it a tax that we're prepared to pay? And I think society has said yes, it is. But I think there needs to be an awareness when you do restrict supply like that, there is a consequence. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well said. In 2011, Ryan, you were pivotal in launching BD Living and transforming BD Development Group into simply BD. Maybe start by talking a bit about BD Living. Like, why did you launch it? What is your vision for it today and the future?
Yeah, BD Living is our residential arm. I should have started it earlier than I did. It's interesting because our roots, again, my dad was a house builder in the 50s and 60s. He built 6 P&E prize homes, so kind of going back to our roots, but we have many sites, and this is actually a good sort of segue from your last question. We have a significant inventory of industrial property, lands, buildings, and in some cases, our sites are better serviced or suited to residential. And I was of the view, well, why would we sell this site to a residential developer? Let's just create a residential development division. We have, a lot of the same aptitudes, those same people, trade relationships. There's a natural overlap there. I'm thrilled we did that, by the way. And so to take there's a project right now in Burnaby called KIN that'll be finishing, and the building's going to be finishing this year. It's from a site my dad bought in 1982 that he developed 60,000 square feet on, 3-acre site. I did actually do my first leasing deal there in 1992. So here now we're taking down the building that we built and repurposing it to residential. Like that is so exciting for me to think our company has that sort of bandwidth. So BD Living's done great. We're partners with Anthem Properties. We're just finished the 5th tower at Station Square at Metrotown. We're actually having a closing dinner tonight because that's been a sort of 12-year partnership with my good friend Eric Carlson. It's amazing. Multiple projects in Coquitlam, West Vancouver now. Our big one coming up is Fraser Mills in Coquitlam. We've just been approved for 5,000 units in Coquitlam. It's going to take 20 years to build out. So BD Living is becoming more and more important. Our office for BD Living is downtown. Great dynamic group. I'm really excited that we launched it. But quite frankly, I think we should have started earlier. And to answer your question even more fully, we had a client called Skeens Engineering in like 2005 or 6, and we were building for them in Coquitlam, and they said, Ryan, we have the site that we own at Pacific and Hornby. Love to give you first crack at it. It's an awesome high-rise site. Like, it's amazing, but I would know how to value it. I've got no one around me to assess what's this worth and how are we going to build it. It's an opportunity that we just had to pass by. Well, I wish we could have been able to take advantage of that, right? So given our relationships and the sites we own, it was a natural for us to get into that. I think we should have done it sooner.
Yeah.
But you learn, right? You learn from, I won't call it a mistake, but you learn from experiences like that. So,
Okay, well, that's great, and congratulations for doing that. If you were to look at, I don't know what measurement you use or metric you use to measure yourselves by, I would assume maybe number of units built. I'm curious to know, since 2011, like how many homes have you, or residences have you built, so to speak?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't have the exact number off the tip of my tongue, but it's upwards of 2,000.
2,000?
Yeah, 2,000 units. Yeah. And I think over the next, 20 years, we're probably going to average 400 to 600 a year kind of thing. So we've got some awesome sites and a really exciting team. So
good for you for doing this. I mean, this also ties in as a good segue into talking about affordable housing, which we're going to get into, because we need entrepreneurs, businesses like yours, quite candidly, my view, to take the risks of making these developments happen, because it doesn't come without risks.
No.
Right. And especially depending on the municipality you're building in. And I mean, hopefully we'll have some changes here, at least in Vancouver. And I know you look at this, it was interesting. Bob Rennie was on last week, and he too said, this is a regional issue. Like we can't just look at Vancouver. We've got to look at this more broadly. Before we get into that conversation, I want to just pivot for a minute and talk about the cultural differences between Canada and the United States. Your father was very successful. You're very successful. One of the reasons I started Coastal Front is because I've been lucky enough to work with lots of people like yourself in my sort of day-to-day business practice of managing money, who've been very successful, and they have really great stories to tell. And I wanted the stories to be told because I think it gives good inspiration for the young people around us who want to learn how they can maybe be successful in their own way. But it's also because I look at the difference between what I see in the States. When you look at the States, right? They almost like they turn success stories into like celebrity status. You look at like Elon Musk or Steve Jobs, the Shark Tank, right? And then here in Canada, I mean, one of the reasons I was really excited to have Chip Wilson on last summer is because there's a guy who's been completely vilified, and he's probably created more opportunities for women. And created more female millionaires, and done more for the economy in this province, in this city, than anybody else. So I guess my starting question is, why do you think we have this sense to want to vilify in Canada, especially out here in the West Coast? That if you were in the States, maybe you'd be on Shark Tank, right? But what do you? What's your sense of that?
I'm glad you raised it. I think about it all the time, and I don't have an answer, but there's no question that the people I know, when someone's successful, there seems to be always someone who's taking a shot at them or a negative way. You think someone like Chip, and how through him and his team and his family and the ingenuity and the brains and the risk, and look at the result and how everybody in our community benefits from that. This should be celebrated and welcomed, but there's always someone there. And I don't know if that's a way that Canadians want to be different than the U.S., or it's something that comes from our history. I'm not sure, but on the positive side, I think it does keep people humble. But at the same time, I think we do need to celebrate risk-taking and success. And people often will look at the results, but not understanding, as you said earlier, these projects carry a ton of risk. You're borrowing a lot of money. You're putting a lot of money in on the hopes that something's going to work. And if things go well, they'll take a shot at you. If things don't go well, you sort of get dismissed. So I don't have the answer for you, but I'm really glad that you take the time to celebrate these stories, because I think it's important for our community.
Yeah, and I can definitely say, you use the word humble. Every single successful entrepreneur I brought in on the studio here in the last 4 years, they're all very, very humble. Like they don't come in here being boastful. So that's, I think, one thing I like to highlight to people I talk to, and why I do this is to point out that, like, you can be successful and humble at the same time.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a boastful individual. You don't. Your results kind of speak for themselves.
Well, perhaps maybe this is a way that Canadians, like, we try to keep people's egos in check. Like, the Americans can be so, we know that they can be like, and I love that. I to be honest with you, I think about it a lot. I spend a lot of time in the States. I think Canadians need to be a little bit more like Americans, just a little, and Americans need to be a bit more like Canadians. Somewhere in the middle is the answer. Yeah. Dynamic entrepreneurial zeal, but a strong social conscience and sort of taking care of your fellow person. I think the answer lies somewhere in between. But it reminds me of, I'm a huge U2 fan, and I've had the good fortune of meeting Bono several times through our involvement with the One campaign. I've seen U2 perform in Ireland, and to watch them perform, and they don't take anything for granted. Their own audience there is quite, okay, what have you done for me lately? They're not like, oh, you're Bono. They don't, the whole celebrity thing, they don't buy into it. And I think it's helped keep the band and everyone around them, again, in that modest, humble state. They're still trying to prove themselves, even though they've been doing it for 40 years. So maybe there's a bit of good in that, as long as it doesn't go too far, keeping people from their heads getting too big. I don't know.
Yeah. Well said. Rattle and Hum. Remember that was one of the very first music documentaries, and you see tons of them on Netflix now. But great band. Yeah. Okay, Ryan. I'd like to ask you more along the lines around companies in Vancouver, success. We've seen different times in which BC has lost headquarters to places like Calgary and Alberta. Do you feel like we need more headquartered companies here in BC? Do you support the idea, you mentioned Amazon earlier, like of having big tech come in here? And there's an argument to be said that the one downside to having a company like Amazon come in is they suck up all the talent for tech that don't allow small tech companies to thrive. But then there's the other side of the argument, which is, well, they spin off a lot of other businesses. What's your take on headquartered companies in BC and building, being a BC being a business-friendly province?
Yeah, I first of all, I think in the investment of large tech companies and the jobs that are generated and the incomes are wonderful and really good for the region. So I think that's a given. Ideally, you'd have more head offices, 100%, but I don't think you're going to get them between Toronto and between Calgary and the different tax regimes and what have you. So I don't know if we're going to get that, but 100% when you've got large companies coming to town wanting to employ people and investing their ingenuity and their capital in our region, without foreign investment, without investment generally, and this is one area where Canada, quite frankly, has really fallen down. Like, our private sector investment has really suffered, and it's the big part of the reason why our productivity is lagging, why our economic growth, which is meager at best, and I don't even look at the economic growth number. I look at economic growth per capita. We have all this immigration, which is great, and then you're going to still just eke out. So the average Canadian needs to understand that prosperity comes from productivity, investment. So anytime we have that, I think it's a good thing. Can it cause issues with housing? Well, sure. Demand for housing goes up. The market should be then able to supply it, and we'll get to that, I'm sure, in a minute. But I think it's wonderful when we get these companies to come to Vancouver.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Ryan, that's a great segue into housing. So Canada's overnight rate is now at 4.25%, the highest since 2008. Average 5-year fixed term mortgage now is north of 6%. And so we've obviously seen housing cool off now. And prices have come down a little bit, but affordability has been offset by these much higher borrowing costs for the average Canadians. So, how do young people, how are they going to get ahead here? Like, what's your outlook on getting affordable housing available for younger working people, families that want to get into the real estate market?
Yeah, it's a huge issue. I think there's no question about it, particularly younger people, because unless they have the massive deposit that they need, they can't get into the market. So you're going to see more and more renting. I personally actually don't have any issue with that. I think for a lot of people, renting is the way to go. Mm-hmm. They can take that capital as they build it up and probably invest it better elsewhere. But at the same time, it's a dream of a lot of people to own. And this is a major challenge. It's a major challenge for governments. Many cases, and you're seeing this, that the younger people that are getting into the market, they have the bank of mom and dad that are helping them out and using the equity that they've been able to get. But not a lot of people aren't so lucky, quite frankly, shouldn't have to rely on that to get in. So government's going to have to come up with some creative solutions, which they started to do. And then they get worried because then the professors say, oh, well, that's going to stoke demand. Well, okay, so what? It stokes demand. If we're supplying, price sends a signal to the market, then we're supposed to respond with supply. It's a huge issue between the generations, and I think you have now political leaders who are really turning their attention to this and coming up with more creative and innovative solutions to there's no one-size-fits-all answer. All I can tell you is that we have to come up with things, because young people should be afforded the same opportunity to own a home that their parents and grandparents were. Yeah. I think it's fundamental.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a free market capitalist. I'm a big believer in it, that government's role should be to set a set of guidelines or rules and regulations for, say, for example, I work in financial services, set up a set of guidelines on how we conduct ourselves with the investing public so that you don't have scams and frauds and people are not taken advantage of.
Right.
But beyond that, I believe that step aside and let the free market figure its way out. I mean, like if there is a shortage of supply, like I'm a big believer in just simple supply and demand theory.
That's right.
Are you on the same page?
I'm totally on the same page. And again, you've seen in the last couple of years where there's this controversy between supply and not supply. And by the way, I don't understand the people who are against more supply. Let's just say, well, if we happen to be wrong with this, what's the downside to more supply? It creates a ton of jobs, there's more activity, and the people who are putting up this housing, developer, what have you, they're the ones taking the risk. So yeah. I don't see the downside in supply. And if you actually follow the logic, then you could say, well, what if we took 100,000 units of housing out of the marketplace now and created industrial instead? Would that have a negative impact on affordability? Of course it would. So I think that ship hopefully has sailed. I think what we have to say, though, is that supply is a critical part, but I don't think it's the only part, because like anything else, even if land were free now and you're building a high-rise, the number you'd need as a developer with free land would be an amount that for a lot of people is still unaffordable. Right? So I think there's a role for government and housing societies to take and lands that are underutilized in particular and create housing for people who otherwise can't afford it. You think about a car, right? Let's say everyone has to have a car. Well, there's a certain cost it is to actually build that car, and you can create as much as you want. Some of that will filter down to other people, but others won't. So I think you have to look at it from a multi-pronged perspective, but 100% supply has been artificially constrained. There was a great Bank of Nova Scotia study on this 3 or 4 months ago. I think it was quite pivotal. It used the data to prove what we already know, that there's a housing shortage. And there's multiple reasons why that is, and I don't know if you want me to get into them, but there is no question that price sends a signal to the market. The market has to be able to respond. But when it can't, because it takes too long to get projects through a city hall because there's only a certain number of people, or you have all this land. Look at Vancouver, the percentage of the city of Vancouver itself that is single-family homes. It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So politicians, understandably, they want to get reelected, are concerned about character of the neighborhood. There's no way in the world. We can't have it both ways. You have one of the best cities in the world. People are going to continue to want to live here. okay, that in and of itself is going to create an affordability issue. You're not utilizing your land properly. And then you hear, like, I live in West Vancouver. There's a site on the corner, and there's this house, and someone had this idea of creating like a interesting, funky building with like 6 or 7 units. I thought it was brilliant. It's this missing middle. And yet, the neighborhood up in arms, flipping, the developer's going to make money. No, to the extent there's upside in the zoning, the city can take that and maybe take those funds and invest in other housing. And we've had a disconnect between provincial government. This is why David Eby, and I really applaud him for his talk and getting a bit tougher with some of these municipalities. You've got sites that are right on rapid transit, and a certain municipality or city is not approving high-rise density there. This is crazy. Like this is absolutely wrong. I lost my train of thought. But there's important leadership required at the government level to get more housing into the system.
Yeah, well, that's really well said. And speaking about David, David's been he's a friend of mine. He's been on Coastal Front twice. Now he's premier, and since he's become premier, he has made 8 separate announcements around housing. This latest one he announced on Monday, which is a kind of expansion on what he'd already brought up, 2 or 3 months ago, I really like. Basically, he's saying to municipalities in a soft way, not yet in hard. He's taking the carrot versus the stick approach right now, which is you need to set your own housing, criteria, and you have to give that to us as the province, and you need to hit those targets. And if you don't hit those targets, then we're going to help you do it. But he's also come out earlier, before he was premier, saying that he's open to the idea of superseding these municipal governments if they're not going to approve projects fast enough. I know we're talking regional, but we are in Vancouver, and now we have also a new mayor. I think the voters spoke.
Can we come back to that for a second?
Yeah,
I just want to say I think it's great, and we've said for years. And again, one of the sites that we have that's right on a SkyTrain station, and there's no high rise. It doesn't make any sense to me. And we've said for the longest time, it's going to take a senior level of government to tell the municipalities with respect, because a lot of them are great. A lot of them have really done their share when it comes to the housing file. 100%. Others haven't, but it's going to take a senior level of government to be a bit strong, and that's leadership, and that is part of what it's going to take. But there are so many aspects to this. There's another city, again, when you look at the lands that we have and the ability to densify in certain cases, the uptick there that a lot of these jurisdictions actually collect in terms of fees and CACs is significant, but they are not the level of government that's responsible for housing, so they get to take those funds. Those funds should be used there's so much wealth that has been created. Isn't that a natural place to source that capital and build housing, particularly on government-owned lands? There are so many sites that you drive by, whether the BCIT, they're great. They're going to redo their campus. You drive by Willingdon and Mosscrop. There's all this great land. Why is there not student housing on this? Why? And it's a bit frustrating, but I feel that the tide is starting to turn in that direction. Sorry to interrupt, but I think
no, that's great. I agree. With these various announcements today, we talked about this latest one, which is basically setting targets for municipalities that they have to set themselves and then adhering to them. Or are there any other announcements that David has recently come up with, or Ravi Kolon, that you're like, I like it, or any that you could be critical of? Or you're like, nah, that's not really going to do much. It's not going to move the needle.
The one the other day where they're trying to coordinate, because they understand that a lot of these projects, a lot of social housing projects, have been delayed by bureaucracy in Victoria and throughout the provincial government. They're looking at ways of streamlining that to get the housing done sooner. So they seem to have a pretty good grasp of the issues, and the fact that they're on it is a great thing. But again, go back to the municipal jurisdictions. They maybe need some help from the government too. It's hard for them to find enough people to do the processing of the permitting. But for the longest time there, you had so much demand, but some of the cities can only process so many applications.
Right.
I have the view, double the permit fees, hire more people.
Right.
Demand is there. The extra time as a developer for another month of holding your site, the permit fees would be 3 times extra, and you're still better off. We'll pay you more. I know they're having a hard time doing that, but if you pay enough people, bring people from the States or other countries.
You know what Bob's solution was? He said, why don't we, for everybody that works in the approval offices of City Hall, pay him $1 a door and a bonus. at the end of the year. So if they every one of those employees gets $1 for every door that's approved.
Well, you know what? Incentivize. Like all in favor of that. But you know what happened, and this is really important because we talk about supply and price increases and the like. And I'm not saying massive supply is going to lead to a price drop, but what it would have done and what it can do is temper these increases. So we had a project 7 or 8 years ago. We went to market. We expected X dollars. Well, guess what? We had no competition because City Hall could only process so many things. Mm-hmm. We achieved a number that's a little better than what we thought. What does that mean? Any other developer goes, oh, they achieved this. Now land is worth this. It inflated the entire market. And again, these are artificial constructs because not only do we restrict the supply of these sites, but we restrict how long it takes to process the applications. So a lot of this is self-imposed. These are like unforced errors that we as a community and as region levels of government need to come together on to solve. And I think that's starting to happen.
Yeah. Ryan, I've talked to a lot of people who work in the development space. They work for, they're pretty senior people who work for companies like yours who've told me that, and now this is, of course, these are conversations before this latest election, that they've just basically, they're kind of exiting the Vancouver market, going to Burnaby, going to North Vancouver, going to Edmonton because, and I love the term that Chip Wilson gave me last summer when I interviewed him. He said, capital goes to where it's most loved.
Yeah.
Right. And so if the money is more loved in Edmonton, that's where the capital will go. Is there any municipality in Metro Vancouver that's very, pro-development and doing things differently than, say, like if something maybe our new mayor, Ken Sim, could learn from to go, yeah, you know what, New West or, Langley or Chilliwack is doing this. Like, yeah, these guys have got it figured out. Yeah. What would be
100%?
Which municipalities doing that?
I'll give one industrial and maybe a 2 on the residential side. Some credit on this. So firstly, just on the industrial side, we do a lot of work in Delta. We have for 30 years, and you're talking about administration and the government, no matter who's been in charge there, that really values industrial land, the tax base, the jobs, and working with people in a cooperative way where you want to get the end result the same. It just makes our lives so much more enjoyable to be working as a team to have these successful projects. And so Delta has been wonderful on that side. Residentially, Coquitlam has been great. They've got wonderful people at Coquitlam who are, again, approving a lot of projects, doing their part to deal with the housing crisis. They're great. The rezoning process in Coquitlam is so much faster than some other jurisdictions. And like, well, why don't you just look at how they do it instead of some antiquated, first reading and wait this many weeks and this work. No, it's compressed.
Right.
It's because someone is saying, okay, we want to get things done faster here. So I think it comes from the top. Coquitlam's great. Burnaby's done a heck of a job in, again, providing a ton of housing to the region. You look at Vancouver, take an area of Vancouver and look at Burnaby, and the amount of density along the stations in Burnaby, it's amazing.
Yeah, you can almost tell where the border is.
You can tell where the border is. Yeah. And why is that? Right?
That's crazy.
Again, these are artificial constructs. Housing is a regional issue, and you find in the media there's a lot of city, Vancouver City. What is it? The city itself? Like, I grew up in Burnaby, and quite frankly, I'm like, I couldn't afford to live in the city of Vancouver. My wife and I are like, okay, we're going to live like we lived in Port Moody and Coquitlam and out in that area, which is wonderful, amazing. But this right to live in the city of Vancouver, it's not a city of Vancouver issue. It's a regional issue. Yeah. And so what someone's paying for a townhouse in Surrey or in New Westminster and their monthly rent, that's what matters.
Yeah.
If someone has to get on a SkyTrain and they're working 15, 20 minutes, like, who cares? There's no divine right to live in the city of Vancouver.
Yeah.
It seems really weird to me.
I almost wonder if it'd be better for us to just amalgamate all these municipalities. You get rid of a whole bunch of government jobs. You basically fire probably a good dozen mayors and city councilors, and now you've got like the GTA, right? You've got a much more broader view of the housing problem.
It's pretty rare to find politicians or people that are going to sort of create a structure like that sort of eliminates their role. Again, that would come to a senior level of government saying, hey, and I do think there's a limit to that amalgamation sort of thought, but there are probably jurisdictions in Metro Vancouver that should amalgamate. I just don't know where the leadership would come from to do that, but for sure. There's a lot of inefficiency and created, but I do think that we have there's a bit more political will now, and people are starting to get it. And quite frankly, someone who's complaining about housing affordability and then opposes a zoning change in their neighborhood, I mean, I'm sorry, you can't have it both ways.
Yeah.
And it's going to take leadership. And again, look at the city of Vancouver, all these single family homes. Can you imagine if you did row housing or multi-level, town? Density doesn't have to be a big concrete high rise. There's a million things to do. And you go down Kingsway, and I think this is starting to change. You drive down Kingsway in Vancouver, and just the opportunity to revitalize and have 3-4 story rental above the commercial, there is so much potential density that can be had without disrupting, I don't think, neighborhoods that much. So.
And I think that area around Queen Elizabeth Park, the Cambie corridor there,
Yes.
I mean, I think that's a great example of how a neighborhood's been transitioned in a really positive way. I mean, beautiful
gorgeous.
condos.
Yeah.
I know the Wall Corporation did that development down on, is it Burrard Street that's heading towards Marpole?
Yes, yeah.
So there's some great examples that you're talking about.
100%.
Yeah.
So.
Campbell Heights that's in
Surrey,
right?
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about Campbell Heights and where maybe the next wave of sort of industrial development is, and maybe speak to that before?
We've done a fair amount of work in Campbell Heights. It's a site actually Joe Siegel and developed all the land around there in probably around 20 years ago. We're looking on a map, where is this? It's kind of in the middle of nowhere. We bought some land and started to develop. We've done several projects down there, and now you drive there and there's a ton of people working, lots of jobs, lots of big buildings. It's not, I don't think, the best located because it's not right on a highway, but we're so starved for land that people are like, okay, this is the place to be. We don't have another sort of Campbell Heights. There's some additional lands around there that can be had. So I think that the region has recognized this, and so we are adding to that base there. And so I think you're going to see there isn't, how do I say this? It's not like you've got 400 acres out there that all of a sudden is going to go from a certain use to industrial, but around the edges, sites that are kind of in that gray zone, they're not residential. What can we do? The region understands they have to continue to add. I think we're going to be okay for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, but you start looking out 5 to 10, 15 years, you've got a problem. Unless some of the ALR lands that maybe marginal farming sites come out, I'm not sure exactly what you do. Then they talk about densifying. Easier said than done. To densify industrial and build 2-story warehouses that are 30 feet clear, first of all, costs a fortune, but it leads to column spacing down below that's quite inefficient. So unless you have one tenant that wants to take both levels, it hasn't proven itself yet to be a viable model. I think that day maybe we'll be forced into that. But then again, it becomes more expensive. So if you're deciding where you're going to have your business in Vancouver or Calgary at half the price. So this the land limits our economic development opportunities, but the cost as well will limit what companies will come to the market. So that lack of affordability, I think, is a negative for the region overall.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I'm going to switch gears now, Ryan, and talk about philanthropy. Your family's obviously known for its success, but you're also very well known for what you and your dad have done for our community. You contributed $100 million over the last decade to BC Children's Hospital, Ronald McDonald House, Burnaby Hospital, BCIT, several others. You've also contributed $22 million to SFU. Tell me what motivates you to be giving back so much. I mean, these are very large numbers, to be giving back so much money to the community.
I think, for clarity, I think the $100 million would include the $50 million for BD Luminaries, the 22 for SFU, and those other organizations. Okay. It's actually probably well above 100 now. Yeah. The motivator, I think, is there are several. I mean, one, I think it's the right thing to do. There's a limit to what government can do. We already have, relatively, I think, to other countries in the world, developed countries, very high taxes as it is. The higher you tax, the less economic activity you're going to have. So there's a gap there, and I think it's a really significant role for private philanthropy because the needs are there, but also adding a bit of an entrepreneurial zeal to it, identifying areas that improvements can be made and measuring them and trying to exact a bit of a discipline there. But the motivation is to give back to a community that made the wealth generation possible to begin with,
right?
And as a way to say thank you. And quite frankly, if I'm a big believer in capitalism and free markets, but I think people in society it's important to see people who have had success giving back.
Mm-hmm.
And if not, that can lead to, understandably, maybe a bit of resentment or frustration, or kind of look at that person made all this money, what are they doing back? So there's several reasons for it, and quite frankly, it feels really good. So I guess it's a bit selfish, because I thoroughly enjoy in my heart how it feels to help other people.
Yeah, I'm sure it would. Now, is there any one particular, may not be the one that you wrote the biggest check to, but is there any one particular cause, or, I mean, outside, we're going to get into Luminaries in a minute, but outside of that, or charity that you've donated to over your last couple of decades that you're like, it could be something very grassroots that you really, really like. It really kind of warms your heart.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to come to, there are so many. I just want to give credit to Joe Siegel, who was a mentor who passed away last year. Joe was a huge inspiration for me philanthropically. Peter Brown as well. I've always sort of looked to my elders, my dad, and for inspiration. And there are so many great causes. I mean, we've been less so now because I think there's so many other people that they have on board. But Children's Hospital obviously does incredible work. We're really proud of our association with the One campaign. Bono started One. One is an advocacy organization that basically lobbies government for foreign investment to eliminate extreme poverty around the world, HIV/AIDS, what have you. The impact that One has had globally is huge, but we're really proud of our association in Canada. We're the benefactor in Canada for One. They've done really incredible work. Ronald McDonald House are amazing. Our staff go twice a year to cook dinners. We supported their capital campaign years ago, and we provide ongoing support. And I've told them the next time they go to raise money, we're going to be there to they do incredible work. These families, imagine coming, you live in Prince George and your son or daughter has cancer and they're at Children's Hospital, like, where are they going to stay? Well, they've got somewhere to stay, right? Yeah. It's so important, the work that they do, and we're really proud of that association. If I looked at a list, I could go on. There's so many, but it also, and I'm glad you asked this, because I've been very fortunate. We've made a lot of money. I've got a great lifestyle. But one of the motivations for me, and I'm 54 now, to keep going and keep growing and keep driving, is to help others. The more success we have, the more we do, the more we can help the community. So it's a real driver for me and for our employees as well. I think they're really proud to work for a company that cares so much about the community. That's what we're trying to achieve. Well, it's a great
philosophy, Ryan. I'm glad that you speak about that, because a lot of people who are maybe those ones that want to vilify the likes of you and other guests I've had on the show see it maybe as a zero-sum game, but it's not. Like this can be a win-win all around. Like, you can be successful, you can create more wealth for yourself, but as a byproduct from that, you're creating jobs, you're adding to the tax base, you're able to have this extra capital, be able to donate back into society. It's like, it is a win all the way around.
100%. And those funds are coming right back into this community, full stop, 100%. And we're going to continue to do it. I've got to say that the tax system is quite interesting, because, as you know, when you donate shares of a publicly traded company, then you avoid the capital gain, you get your donation. Okay, that's great, but that same benefit isn't there for real estate or for selling private businesses.
Oh, it's not?
No. And Stephen Harper, before he left office, wanted to equalize those things. So if someone who doesn't happen to be in the public markets has a private business, or they own real estate they've owned for a long time, if they want to sell your real estate and then give those proceeds to charity, you can avoid the gain.
That could unleash a huge amount.
The amount of philanthropy that would be, the philanthropic dollars that would be generated from such a move would be absolutely ginormous. You've got clients, people who've owned real estate for a long time. It would unleash a wave of funds, I guarantee it. One of the first things that the Trudeau government did when they came to power was, like, we're not putting that in, like, forget it. And so there's groups that are continuing to lobby for that. And while it could, in theory, cost the government a little bit, in many cases, people wouldn't be selling these assets. I don't know how you even measure it. But there's no question that society would get way more out of it than is currently the case. And hopefully that change comes. And if it does, our philanthropic initiatives will increase as a result.
Yeah. That's really, really well said. Well, Ryan, I think this is a great segue into talking about BD Luminaries. I mean, the name itself is an awesome name. Did you come up with it yourself?
I did not. One of our graphic designer, Chris Neary, came up with it. along with Martina Mekova, the executive director. Actually, I think it was Martina's idea. So if she watches this for Martina, I think it was you. Chris may have. So team effort, but probably Martina. Yeah, she's amazing.
Well, BD Luminaries, as I understand, is a social profit enterprise that removes barriers for bright students from advancing in their education. And to date, you've now awarded 487 scholarships to these students. So maybe you can expand on my brief description. Tell us about BD Luminaries. What is it, and what caused you to kind of create?
Yeah, great.
BD?
No, thanks for asking. I get excited every time we talk about it. So BD Luminaries is a unique scholarship program that really targets students who have faced significant adversity, mainly financial, but it could be other family crises, other adversity. They could be relatively new to Canada and have had some challenges adapting, and the like. So we started this, we announced it on my 50th birthday almost 5 years ago. Martina Mekova is our executive director. I had come up with the idea when I was 48, thinking, okay, I'm going to be turning 50 soon. What's the next big thing? And I kept coming back to the SFU experience, which the investment in BD School was really motivated to help students. I grew up in Burnaby in a real mixed neighborhood, and I worked, but I didn't really have to worry about the funding to go to school. I had it relatively easy. A lot of my friends didn't. And I think, well, it shouldn't be the case that students who have the will and the desire and the work ethic and the brains they shouldn't have a barrier to go to school. Financing shouldn't be a determining factor there. So what if we can help bridge that divide and provide that support, particularly those who are facing significant adversity? So that was the idea. Mm-hmm. I talked to a lot of people before we actually launched it, and the feedback was absolutely outstanding. But it wasn't just about the money. It's important to have mentorship. All the students have mentors. We have full-time counselors. So if the student has an issue, they can call the counselor. There's wraparound support. We have peer-to-peer network of students just sort of based on the YPO model. So our goal isn't just to here's cut a check, you're on your own. We want to provide a full level of service to help these students get all the way through. And our retention rate now is like 96%, which is very high for a scholarship program.
Wow.
And our applications just opened for our fifth cohort. Our first cohort are graduating in May. Yeah. And it's just awesome to see. Like every year we do an event with the parents and the students. And when we first started, I said, one day we're going to be in some auditorium and there's going to be like hundreds of people. And now we're in the convention center and the parents come up and they're hugging you and they're so appreciative of these opportunities. And you're taking these kids, some of them may get other scholarships, but a lot of them, might not qualify for other scholarships. They're not all AA plus students, the A- student, the B plus student who would be an A student if they weren't working a job to support their family because, mom or dad's at home with, 5 siblings. Like the stories, you read these applications, it's really moving the challenges that some people have. And our job is to get in there and find them and say, look, we believe in you. And we're going to help you all the way through. So applications just opened for our 5th cohort. I can't believe that's even happening. And, we've got 500 applications. We have an amazing advisory board. We have an incredible committee that reviews all the applications. Universities Canada back east have been instrumental. They help read all the essay applications. We have an entire infrastructure that has been just wonderful. It's going better than I ever could have imagined. Wow. Martina and the team are absolutely sensational. They love what they do. And we're always looking at ways of trying to improve it. So we added a single parent program where I was talking to different people. Former Premier Christy Clark, I asked her, what do you think about this idea for BD Luminaries? And she said, great, but how about single parents, those who really want to go back to school, but they can't afford it? So we now have a single parent program, right? We've got a program that targets refugees, those who are in their 20s that have come to Canada, but they want to go back to school. So, and we just recently announced a graduate program for some of our students that are graduating. If they've been involved in the Luminaries community, we're going to look to see if we can support them in graduate school. So this is I look at it like a social profit business. It's a division of our company that provides societal dividends and benefits, not purely financial. And it's scalable, right? Yeah. You've got an incredible infrastructure. It's going really well. So it's a nice place for future philanthropic sort of endeavors as we scale it up. So we're really proud of it. It's absolutely, I get the cards from the students and the notes. And, one of the best days of the year is when we call the students to let them know they've been accepted into the program. And some of them we've done on video, especially during COVID. And I can still remember some of them. You tell them, and the look on their faces that they've been chosen to be part of it. And it's not just the money and whatever. It's telling them, no, we've selected you. We want you as part of this.
Yeah.
That burst of self-esteem and the value, you just see it in their face. It is absolutely priceless. It's one of the best things. And we want more of it. We want to do more and help others achieve these goals.
Well, good for you. That's an amazing story. I guess to bring it full circle, I think the ultimate would be to see some of these people coming and working at BD.
Well, we've had a couple interns already.
Have you?
And that's another thing I forgot to mention. I'm glad you raised that. We have create internship opportunities in a whole host of companies for these students. So many of them have been employed throughout the summers, and various companies are affiliated now with the Luminaries program.
Yeah.
So,
we'd love to get involved ourselves. We hire on interns around the calendar year. So
fantastic. Yeah.
I love supporting
we'll follow
young
up
people.
with you on that.
Yeah,
for sure.
BD has a motto which is built for good. You also mentioned last time that we spoke when we were having our pre-podcast call that with respect to BD Luminaries, it's you mentioned this just a moment ago, is run like a social profit, a societal dividends. Can you maybe talk about this motto of built for good? Like who came up with that, and what's that meant for? Yeah,
so now I've got it clear in my head. Chris Neary did come up with Built for Good, and he's our sort of graphic designer, website guy. When we were doing a rebranding, and he came up with this Built for Good, and I loved it right away. It's this double entendre. Actually, you could probably interpret it in three ways, but from a pure construction standpoint, you've done it right. It's built for good. It's built well. You can stand. I want someone to look at our name and go, oh, I'm taken care of. Like I'm in good hands. I've got nothing to worry about. So the motto is to convey that, but also built for good, like built for the benefit of society, built for the benefits to society, built for all the right reasons. So there's different ways of interpreting it, and so it's a bit of a play on words. It's a lot of fun, but I'm really proud of it. I think it really expresses sort of our key value system, as well as we can.
Yeah. Good. So we're beginning of 2023. You're going to be celebrating your 55th birthday, is that right?
Yeah, it's November, so yes, I've got some time, but yes, it's coming up.
So what have you kind of got as far as a vision for yourself? I don't get the sense you're planning on retiring anytime soon here, Ryan. So is that a fair statement?
I'm philosophically opposed to retirement. I'll never retire. My dad worked till he was 91. He came to the office until 6-8 weeks before he died. He was still coming to work, so I plan to sort of follow the same if I live that long. But no, there's too much to do, and I get really excited by our business, the people, the opportunities that we have. I just get so excited. I've got a little bit of attention issues, and fortunately it's good. I can be in 2 offices. We've got a million things going on all the time, but I love
what do you like for 2023 though? If we just take it back to the short term here, what do you like most excited about trying to accomplish this calendar year?
From business or
business
personal?
side.
From business side, for sure. So I touched on it earlier, our Fraser Mills project in Coquitlam, which is 5,000 units. We recently got approval on 4th reading, so we're constructing the sales center, we're starting the marketing, getting that out there. This is the beginning of what's going to be a 20-year build, and when in your career do you get to build basically a town? There's going to be 8,000 or 9,000 people living there one day, right? This is the start of something so huge. So we have many things we're working on. That's really exciting. I think finishing our Amazon project in South Burnaby, this is our biggest, it's the most expensive per square foot Amazon project in North America. It's 1 million square feet, 3 levels on 25 acres, huge job generator, major project in South Burnaby. So on the industrial side, I'm really excited about that. We're also in the Toronto market. We didn't touch upon that. We're across Canada now, so lots of opportunities in building in Toronto. So there's several things to keep
much more to grow from here.
Much more to go. Yeah, 100%.
Good for you. To finish, you're also a music enthusiast.
Yes.
You mentioned you had a chance to meet Bono a few times, and you're a U2 fan. What's your favorite U2 song?
My favorite U2 song is The Fly from Octung Baby. Octung Baby is my favorite album. I love guitar. I love rock.
Yeah.
I'm not as much of a fan of the slower kind of song. I need music to really kind of move me and drive me. And The Fly, or even better than The Real Thing. Something from Octung Baby.
Yeah, that's a great album.
Yeah.
That was filmed, their videos that they shot for those music videos was all done in Berlin.
That's correct. That's
and
correct.
I think they even recorded the whole thing in Berlin.
Right. That's 100%. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm a big David Bowie fan. Bowie did 3 albums, and they're huge Bowie fans too, and there's a lot of inspiration and crossover there.
Do you play any music yourself?
I played piano growing up, and then I really wanted to play guitar. My dad's like, learn the piano first. I think he was a bit too cheap to buy me a guitar. I wish he had, but I don't play much now, but wish I could.
Yeah, good. Well, it's been great having you on Coastal Front today, Ryan. Thank you very much. Ryan Beedie, CEO of BD, philanthropist, founder of BD Luminaries. Love the work you're doing, and a great story. Thank you for being on Coastal Front today. Best of luck for 2023.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.